Hey guys, welcome to AP Econ. I'm sorry we couldn't have this class live like we normally have done. I'm currently on a flight to Beijing, so I look forward to seeing you guys soon, either on Friday or at the start of next week, depending on when your section is. Instead, I've just pre-recorded this lecture for you so that you can watch it alongside the PowerPoint. So you'll be able to see me in the screen right now in the bottom right, and then you'll be able to see the PowerPoint, which I'll share also in our group chat that you can refer to. Okay. So instead of getting a review from Module 21, which is what we talked about last class together, I just ask you guys to remember that we were concluding talking about the multiplier and talking about aggregate supply and demand. And in fact, if you look in the textbook, you'll notice that we just finished up right up here with Module 21, right? And then the next thing is an entire new section, Section 5. And this means Section 5 of the textbook, but also if we look at how this corresponds to the AP macro exam, we see that we have actually just finished Unit 3 of the AP macro exam. That unit wasn't too long. What did it take us? Maybe a week and a half to get through it. But I think this upcoming unit regarding the financial sector is a bit longer, so I'm glad we've got some more time to cover it. In Section 5 in the textbook, what we're going to be covering are modules 22 through 29, and I'm really excited to get into this section, guys. Maybe you can remember that my bachelor's degree is in finance, and before I was a teacher, I was a banker, and so this is exactly my area of expertise. So I feel very comfortable, confident, and excited to talk to you guys about Section 5. So we're going to get into things like investment and saving, money, the time value of money. This is how I started my business education, or my finance education, was the time value of money. Banking, the Federal Reserve, which we've talked a little bit about, but we're going to get more into that a little bit more. Remember when we were talking about monetary policy on our first lecture of the week, and then money markets and loanable funds, and what markets do we have for loanable funds. So let's go ahead and get started with our first lecture for today. We are going to start with looking at modules 22 through 23. These modules are pretty related, and I felt like it was reasonable to kind of combine these two. Okay, so let's start by looking at this cartoon. Here in this hot air balloon, we have the Fed. The Federal Reserve is tasked with making sure that the economy is going in the right direction, right? We talked about contractionary versus expansionary fiscal policy, and about how if we have inflationary gaps, that's a good time to enact contractionary fiscal policy. And if we're going through a recession, that's a good time to enact expansionary fiscal policy, right? And not just fiscal policy, but we also have monetary policy. And when we have these guys in the air balloon here, they say, looks like we should drop the interest rate, right? We should get into monetary policy. But it looks like the issue is not that the interest rate is bringing down the economy, because you can see the interest rate is just represented by these little bags. The issue is U.S. consumers, right? Consumers are not spending. So it looks like the issue is related to perhaps tax rates. It's related to some other area. So it looks like in this cartoon, it's kind of, the joke is that the Fed is not accurately addressing what the real problem is, right? So you can see that the way that they've tried to solve it, their tool is not working. So that's what they need to figure out. In order to understand how the economy works and to understand how people spend their money, we need to go back to some formulas. And, one or two of these I think we've seen before, but we haven't seen all four of these together like this before. If you go to the start of Module 22, you can find them on there, and I've just copied them over here for us. So when we're looking at a simple economy and simple economics, which is what we're looking at, we can think of it like this. Total income equals total spending, because as consumers earn money through their salary and their wages, they will spend it all. Okay, that's what we're saying in a simple economy. That total income is also equal to consumption plus savings, right? It's just a matter of where they're spending. People could spend it in consumption, right, to consume products and services, or they could spend it in the form of savings, right? The point is they are spending it one way or another. That total spending then, we can think of it as consumption plus investment, because investment can represent types of saving models, but it can also it can also just kind of represent how money can grow over time in terms of the individual. And then finally, if we know that consumption plus savings equals consumption plus investment, then if these terms both go to zero, if consumption goes to zero, then we got zero here, zero there. So that means that savings equals investment, right? Which is what we just touched on just a minute ago. Okay, let's get into the financial system. And before we get too deep into it, I wanted to make sure that we were familiar with some basic finance terms that that maybe we've seen before, but maybe not. Let's start by looking at a surplus, and specifically a budget surplus. When we're thinking of surplus, we're thinking in terms of a product surplus. We have a situation where supply is greater than demand, so we have extra. Well, a budget surplus means something very similar. We have extra money. So the budget surplus in terms of the federal government is the difference between the revenue, which comes from taxes, and the spending, which the government uses in a variety of ways, but to spend on roads or any kind of government spending. A budget surplus exists when there's a net positive, and a budget deficit exists when there's a net negative. The budget balance then will look at that relationship between tax revenue and government spending. Isn't that just the exact same relationship we saw for private sector companies? Profit equals revenue minus expense? Yeah, it is, right? So the budget balance is looking at that. But in terms of the government, we don't call it profit, right? Governments don't profit. We call it a budget balance, okay? And then national savings. National savings are the sum of private savings and budget balance. So that's like the total amount of savings that the government has generated within the economy. And then finally, capital inflow is total inflow of funds into a country. So this is the total value of all the funds that have come into the country. Okay, just a few more terms here. Household wealth is the value of accumulated savings, meaning savings that have added up over time. A financial asset. So what I'm thinking here for these next three terms, guys, assets and liabilities. I'm sure these are terms that we feel comfortable with, but we need to differentiate between a financial asset and a physical asset. A financial asset is a claim, a legal claim that entitles the buyer to future income from a seller. So we're going to take a look at that in a little more detail later on, but it's kind of like a promise or a guarantee of future value. Whereas a physical asset is something that's physically tangible. It's something that the owner has right now, and they can sell it or dispose of it as soon as they want because it's their immediate physical possession, like a chair. And then finally, a liability. A liability is a requirement to repay a debt, repay something that you own. So the way that I remember my assets and my liabilities is I go back to my basic accounting formula, and I remember that assets equal equity plus liability.